everyone, welcome back to this lecture, and in this lecture we're going to finally set up our character animations and animation blueprint. So let's begin. Open your content browser and go into the characters, main character, and where we left in the previous lecture. All I want you to do is create a new folder, name it animations to keep it more organized. Select all of your animations and drag it into this folder. After it's done, right click, open the folder, right click, and you'll see the animation option on the top. Hover over it and you'll have a lot of options, but you have to select the animation blueprint. Select your skeleton, which is SK Manny skeleton. After that, name it whatever you want. I'm gonna name it main underscore char anim BP. Then you can double click to open it. After opening it, you will be displayed this kind of an interface. You're gonna have an anim graph and an event graph and some other properties too. First, in the anim graph, you will have this output post. This basically outputs whatever you have plugged in here. So drag this man out and type in state machine. A state machine is a place where all of your animations are stored. Animation logics are stored, that when to trigger what animation. I'm gonna name it locomotion. You can name it anything. Open it up, and in here you have a entry node. Now from entry node I can drag out a conduit, state alias, and a state. We're gonna just focus on state in this lecture. A state is basically an animation pose which is gonna trigger whenever the particular event has been fulfilled. For example, please remember that from the entry node, the first state you are gonna choose is always gonna be active whether any event occurs or not. For example, I'm gonna drag in a idle state. So idle state will always be active if something is happening or not. Now from idle state I want a walk state, so I'm gonna add in a state and I'm gonna type walk. You can see that on top of this you have this transition kind of icon. I'll explain it. What is it? Now from the walk you have to drag in another arrow towards the idle, and you can see that it tells create a transition. Just leave it and you're gonna have another transition icon. Now what does this mean? This basically stores the boolean value for when an event is triggered, and after checking that it's gonna trigger the animation. For example, I'm gonna create a variable, name it is walking, so it just tells that is walking. So now the default value of is walking is set to false, as you can see, and it's a boolean value. It's a boolean type of value. We have a number of variables in Unreal Engine, for example strings, integer, floats, many of the variable types, but we are going to use the boolean right now. So what does this means? So if is walking is true, that means if a character is walking, then the animation blueprint can enter into the transition of walking. Now you can see that right now idle animation is on 100% active. This means that when nothing is happening, the animation state which our character is in is idle, so it's showing the idle state. Now if is walking tends to be true, then it would transition into walk. Now if is walking is false, it's gonna transition back into the idle state, so vice versa. So in the transitioning back I am gonna get is walking again, and this time I don't want it to be is walking to be true, so I'm gonna just type in not boolean. So this means that is walking is not happening, so it can enter the transition from walk to idle. So you can see that in the animation preview editor, is walking is right now false. If I throw this, you can see that it transitioned from idle to walk state. If I uncheck it, you can see that it transitioned back to idle. Now let's put the animations, you would have an asset browser right besides the animation preview. Just drag the idle, compile, and you can see that idle animation is playing. After that, open the walk animation and get in the walk in place. And now if I check the value for is walking, you can see that our character is walking. If I uncheck it, it just stops. So yeah, that's how animation graph is used to make animations. Now, how do this blueprint knows that my character is walking or not? So for that, we need to go into event graph where all of our events and scripting happens. So first of all, we have this node which is event blueprint update animation. It means that whenever my animation blueprint does something, it always updates. So right now we want a variable which determines that our character is walking or not. So how do we determine that our character is walking or not? So we do it by simply checking the velocity of our character. Right now we can do one simple thing. All I want you to do is open your main character blueprint, and in here what I want is you to do is just right click and type in W key. You can see that we have this right here, get it, and when our key is pressed, I made a variable earlier, but you have to make it. So when my W key is pressed, I want to set is walking to true. Remember that the variable you make in a separate blueprint stays in those blueprints. So I cannot call this is walking to the animation blueprints, and the variables which I make in the animation blueprint I can't call them in here. But there is a way to do that, which I'm gonna show you just now. So we have made this kind of a logic. It's very simple that if W key is pressed, it's gonna set is walking to true, and when it's released, it's gonna set is walking to false. Now, how does this script knows that is walking that W key is pressed? We cannot get the same results which we did from pressing this key in here to here. So what we do to get variables around a blueprint is called casting. Casting is a feature which helps us to get the variables data from some other blueprint, for example from the main character blueprint in here. So how do we do is just drag this node and type in cast to whatever the name of your blueprint is. For mine it's main character, and you can see that main character blueprint is shown here. After that, you get this node. First is when our blueprint is successfully casted, so it's gonna have this node trigger. If the casting failed for some reason, this node is gonna trigger, and from here we can get any of the variables which are in here. So right now, if I drag it and I type in get walking, is walking, you can see that we can get the is walking from here. But now you might think that, oh, it's just simple. Now we're gonna get the in is walking variable in the animation, and we just gonna promote this. So remember, this node when joining with this just puts the value of this into this node. So please remember that. It's very easy to understand. After a bit of practice, you're gonna understand how it works. So now you would say that, okay, if our animation get updated, which means that if our animation is playing, then this event would trigger, which will cast to our main blueprint, main character blueprint, which is this one. Then it would get the is walking from there and promote its value to is walking in our animation blueprint. So a normal person would say, yeah, that's just it, that would work fine. But no, it doesn't. So if you see right here, there is a object node. What does this object node means? Now object node is used to for the animation or any blueprint to know that which object you are referring to. What I mean by that is, it might happen that I have 4 or 5 copies of this main character blueprint. So how does this animation blueprint knows that which one to refer to. So we have a number of ways to do that. We can use the try get pawn owner, we can use the try get pawn controller. So right now we just gonna use this. We can hook this up right here, and when we compile it, you can see that we have compiled without any errors. Remember, we can do this with any blueprint, whether it's an actor or an character. Any blueprint we can cast our variables from. So right now I think it's done. All you need to do is just go into a main character blueprint, into the viewport, then select your mesh, mannequin mesh, go down in here, and you're gonna have this animation section. Now generally the animation mode is on animation blueprint. You can also use animation assets, but I'm gonna use the animation blueprint. And in the anim class, just type in the name of our animation blueprint, which is in here main character anim blueprint, and you can see that animation has started to play. Now let's test this out. I have positioned my camera a bit back so you can see if the animation is playing or not. After that, let's drag this right here and set the pawn possession to 0, player 0, so we can control it. And when we play this, you're gonna see that our character is right here, and you can see the animation is playing pretty well. If I press the W key, you can see that animation is transitioning. If I release it, it's not, and if I'm pressing it, it's transitioning. So this right here, this animation system is the basic version of animation that you can do with Unreal Engine. There is a lot of variation there is a lot of detailed work which goes into making a really good animation system. We have just used 2 states over here, but you can use multiple of them and interlink them. You can also in here you can blend the animations, do that kind of stuff. There is a lot of details which go into it, but this is the bare bone animation. So for that, go into edit options and into the project settings, then drag down until you find the input option. In here you're gonna see 2 options, action mapping and axis mapping. Let's talk about the action mapping. Now action mapping is done when we press a key and we have to associate it with a particular task. For example, if I open this up, now I want to fire my weapon or any weapon in that case. Now what do I do that? How do I do that? So I press my left mouse button and then it simulates firing into the game. How do I do that? I press this plus button, I name this fire, and then either I search in this, the left mouse button, or I click this keyboard icon, and after it's yellow, I'm gonna just press this, and yeah, it's done. So the action mapping actually has only 2 outputs. It's pressed and released. Pressed is when I'm pressing down the key, and released is when I release the key. So it only have 2 values. But axis mapping is a bit different. Axis mapping is actually done associating the movement part of our character with it. Now axis mapping has 2 axes related to it. One is the +1 axis and one is the -1 axis, the positive and the negative axis. Now if I have to move in my world, let's say forward and backwards, so forward is actually in the positive direction and backwards is in the negative direction. So I need 2 simultaneous values for it. So axis mapping come into play in there. As you can see, the game file actually created these axis mapping on its own. I'm sure that you also have it. If you don't, just click on this plus icon, name this whatever you want, and you can see that we only require the 4 main one. We don't need this gamepad or this this one, although we would after some time need that, name them anyways. You can see we only need these 4 of the action mappings. You already might have them. I'm going to open them up so you can see the keys associated and the value associated. You can see it's -1 and +1. So yeah, you can see that W and S key is associated with forward and backwards because we need to get the 2 axis values. So yeah, now let's get over to the main blueprint of our character. Type in move forward. You can see that we have under axis events we have move forward. Don't select this, choose this. Now we need to add some movement data into our capsule component. So we're gonna type in add movement input. We're gonna get this node which adds movement to our capsule. In its axis, in its scale value, we're gonna add the axis value, which is -1 and +1. After that, we're gonna get the control rotation of our capsule, which means in which way it's looking. So control rotation, there you go. Now you can see that it has this rotational value. We don't need this. We need actually only the Z value of this. So we're gonna right click and split the node. Then we have all the 3 axes. After that, because we need this input key to simulate going forward and backwards for our capsule, so we're gonna type get forward vector. Now what's a vector, you may ask? Vector is actually the value when we are moving into a 3D world, because a 3D world is consists of 3 axes, X, Y and Z. So a vector value is consist of also 3 axes, which is X, Y, Z. Let's oh sorry, I just promoted it, I didn't mean to do that. Let's split this to pass in the Z value, and then the return value is gonna go into the world direction. Now if I play this, you can see that my character is now finally moving. That's great. Now let's get the right and left part sorted too. Click in here and type in move right. Under axis event, move right or left, and everything is gonna be same. We have to add the movement input. Axis value is gonna remain the same, -1 to +1. Then we also need the control rotation, but this time we need X along with the Z axis. So remember that we need this X value with the Z value. Now we don't want to get the forward vector this time. Because we're gonna do right and left, we need to get the right vector. So get right vector. We can also split its inputs and just gonna hook these up to here and put the return value into the world location. I'm gonna compile this, and you can see now I am able to move right, left, forward, backward, and of course in the combination of that too. Now we are done with the movement part, and we now are gonna add in the jump functionality. So if you have watched me while explaining this, you can see that we already have a jump axis action mapping, which is spacebar. So let's go in here and type in jump, and I want the action events this time. So jump action events. You can see that we have 2 nodes from here, which is pressed and release. So from pressed, I'm gonna type in jump, and there would be a function which is gonna come out. You can see that jump is a function, it's already pre-made for us. And from released, I'm gonna get stop jumping. Okay, now I'll compile this. If I play, you can see if I press the space bar, our character is jumping. And yeah, that's how it's done. And I think so let's arrange these things. Okay, I want my nodes to be a bit cleaner to look at, so I'm gonna just arrange them properly. And you should also always clean your code, because it's really helpful, because right now our all of these are a bit on a low scale, I can say. These are not that complicated or big enough. But when things start getting complicated, when you're working on quite a big project, things do get really complicated, so you have to properly manage them. So what I'll advise you, select all of this. These are related to our movement, and press C. Then there would be a box created around it, which means comment, which actually creates a box which is comment. It's similar. If you have done Python or any other languages, you know that we can comment. So this is also comments, but in more visual way. So I'm gonna write in movement. There you go. I can also move this around, and this is our jump functionality. So I'm gonna again do this and I can jump. So open your main character blueprint, right click and type in turn right. You're gonna be displayed two options in the axis events, turn right mouse one, and the gamepad we want the mouse one. Then from here, drag out add yaw. As the name suggests, it controls the left and right looking of your camera. Put the axis value into the val. Then type in look up. Choose the look up down mouse. Drag in add pitch. This controls the looking up and down of the mouse. Put the value in here. Then go into your viewport and select your camera and move this into the chest of the character so that we could finally have a first person perspective. And in the details panel of the camera, type in use pawn control rotation. Check this up. What this do is it uses the control rotation of your capsule to control the movement of the camera. Now let's play it, and you can see that we could look around the world. We can walk, we can jump, but you can see that a bit of clipping is happening inside the character. It's very simple to resolve. Just move the camera a bit more further, and to have a proper viewing, always open the new editor window. It gives you the perfect look of how the camera is gonna actually look like. Because if you do this in here in the viewport, I'll show you what generally happens. This right now is shrink. If I shrink it more, then the FOV decreases and decreases, and if I just increase it all the way, the FOV also increases, so it's a problem. So I'll choose always to use the new editor window because it gives a perfect actual simulation of the camera. You can see that the camera can look down. Now I can walk, jump and look around with my camera. So let's get into our character animation blueprint. So let's talk about casting first. So casting is a feature where we communicate between two blueprints. For example, if I need to get something from my character blueprint into the animation blueprint, I'll use the casting function, because you cannot refer the variables directly without casting into any other blueprint. So for example, how we do casting is we just get a node, cast to node to whatever the blueprint we wanted to cast from. Then we have to also provide a proper reference to it. We provide a reference to it because we want our script to know which blueprint to refer to, because it might happen that you have multiple blueprints of the same name. So our script should know that which one to properly refer from and get the data. That's why we use referring. Every blueprint has some kind of its own referring function. For example, for any character blueprint, we normally use try get pawn controller, try get player controller, or try get pawn owner. And for other actor blueprints, we use the reference to element node, and for animation blueprint we use the try get animation blueprint function. So these are all the different types which we are going to use in. Now let's get the logic that how to tell our script that our player is moving. So let's think logically. If a player is moving in the world, then it would have some velocity. So simply what we are going to do from our cast to main character, we're going to get velocity. So this just gets the velocity, and you can see the return value is a vector output. You can tell that it's a vector output because the output node is yellow, so you can tell by that. So we don't want the vector value because a vector value is xyz value, and we don't want the xyz value. So what we are going to do is we're going to simply from here get another function which is vector length. So this turns the vector value into a float value, which we want. And now let's compare this. So if our character is moving, then the velocity of a character would be more than 0. So if this value is more than, which is greater than 0, then our script is gonna set is walking to true. Let's look this up right here. Let's make it this a bit neat. I pressed Q to align them, and let's check if this is working or not. And there you go, our character is now walking properly. I am pressing the WASD keys and you can see that our player is playing the animations. So now let's make the jumping animations also. So if you see, if I jump, then also the animation is playing, because when I jump there is also some velocity gained by our character. So that's why the jump animation is not playing, but rather the running animation is playing. So let's set up that. So first of all, get into your state machine and your state. Now our character could either jump from the idle state or from the walk run state. It can jump from both of the state. So we need to get the arrows from both of state. First we'll set up the idle state. Let's get an arrow, add a state, and type in jump start. Now a jump is basically a 3-stage process in game development. First, the jump animation, the jump starting animation when we lift off from the ground would play. Then a looping animation of falling would play. And then the jump end animation would play, which is the landing animation. So it's a 3-stage animation. So first we'll get the jump start animation. Then we gonna get the jump loop. We're gonna set up the jump loop state. Then we gonna get the jump end. And then from jump end, we're gonna get back to our idle. Now, how do we tell our script that our player is jumping or not? So for that, there is also a function in our pre-programmed function, which is very useful. So again, from in the event graph, from the cast to main character, get you can get the function get movement component. It gets the movement component of the capsule of our character. Then from here we can simply get a very simple node function, which is falling. So this just tells if our character is falling, because when we jump, our character after jumping starts to fall due to gravity. So that's there to tell us that. It gives a boolean output. You can tell because the output node is output pin is red. And let's create a function, sorry, let's create a variable which is gonna be boolean, which is in air. And let's drag it out. There you go. So we have set up this also. Let's get back into our locomotion. So jump start would trigger if our character is in air. So if is in air is true, then our jump animation is gonna play. Now how do we get into jump loop? So we don't have to make any kind of boolean for that. We simply just check one thing. First of all, this animation right here is a one-time play animation. We don't want it to loop again and again. So when this animation would have 0.1 second to end, it means when it's gonna just end, then our anim graph would transition from jump start to jump loop. So how do we do that? Let's get into the transition. We're gonna get time remaining, and you can see that get relevant anim time remaining. It gets the time remaining for the previous animation state. From the return value, we're gonna compare it. If it is less than 0.1, then our animation is gonna transition into jump loop. Now from jump loop, how do we tell our character to get into the jump and animation, our animation blueprint to get into jump and animation? It is very simple. Just get the is in air. When our character would land, then the jump and animation would play. So if our character is not in air, then the jump and animation would play. And from jump and animation to idle animation, we simply get the same thing, which is time remaining for jump end to end. And if it is less than 0.1, then our animation blueprint would transition it into idle. Let's compile this and let's check it out. So you can see that I entered into T pose. This is because I haven't placed the animations in here yet. So for the jump start animation, get the jump and just hook this up with in here. Then in the jump loop animation, get the for loop, and in the jump end animation, get the land. And now if I jump, you can see the animation is playing, but there is some hitching happening when the animation is playing. So why so? So let me tell you what's happening. When our character is landing, the animation is again looping, because right now our animation blueprint is set to loop this animation. So it is looping after the jump and animation has completed due to its landing. It's a technical thing. So for that, let me just show you in more detail. If you see, you see that because it's looping, then a bit of the animation in starting is happening again. So to stop this, just uncheck this loop animation in the details panel. Just click here and then in the details panel, uncheck the loop animation, compile it, and do the same thing with the jump start animation, because we don't want these animation to loop. We just want them to run them once. Just uncheck these. And now if I just do this, you can see that it is playing the animation without any hitches. Let's test this out too. You can see that the animation is playing without any hitches. But when we run and jump, the jump animation is playing. This is because we haven't set the transitions from the walk to the jump start and this whole chain. It's very simple. So from here, again, just go in here. From here, go in here. It's the same logic. Just paste this, hook this up here, compile, and to walk, just get the in air, and there you go. So now if you're walking, and we could jump, but you see there is one problem, that when we land, our character is still moving and the animation of landing is not properly playing. You can see that our character just stands for a few seconds, then the animation takes place. So how do we get rid of this? Now let's do some debugging to how to overcome this problem. What we can do is, if our character is walking, we can just directly go from jump loop to this. We don't want this to transition. And what we'll set is, if our character is walking and not in air, then this gonna transition directly from jump loop to walk animation. So I think so that would be enough. So get the is walking, and from here get a and boolean, get the in air, and drag out not boolean from here, hook this up. Let's try this. So right now I'm walking, let's jump, and there you go. You can see that we overcame that problem. So this is how we do the debugging. To get over things, you have to test things to get over things. That's how you do game development. Otherwise it's difficult for newcomers, but yes. And there you go, our jumping animations are perfectly playing, and our idle to jump animation are also playing, our walk animations are also playing. So yeah, this is it for the lecture.